Spotlights made everything look hotter and smaller, a kind of stage fever I'd learned to name, if not master, after half a dozen auditions and pitches. But I'd never been up in front of this many people. 100, maybe two, in the hush of the Vancouver Tech and Craft Expo's main event hall. Some stood along the periphery, arms folded, half interested, most sat with polite, impassive faces. I held my breath, gripped my hand-carved violin and squinted against the glare. It was March rain outside, smell of crushed maple buds leaking under the double doors whenever someone entered late. My slides had glitched at the start, leaving a blank wall behind me instead of the process shots I'd set up the night before, the little slivers of Sitka spruce, curved ribs steamed and bent by hand. I tried to joke, made some awkward quip about old-school craftsmanship needing new-school luck, already feeling the tension in my cheeks as no one laughed. And what I'm offering is a model for sustainable, individualized luthier work that preserves tradition, blends new acoustic analysis, and gives a living wage to the next generation of artisans, I said, voice only trembling a bit. I believe we can change how musical instruments are made, and who gets to make them in this city. There was a moment, a shift maybe, as if someone in the back coughed, but everyone collectively agreed not to notice. A panel of judges across the front table, all startup veterans, gave me blank looks. One, a real estate developer I knew from my uncle's social circle, pursed his lips and scratched a note I couldn't see. Another, a tech CEO with glossy black shoes, tapped her tablet and looked past my shoulder. "Thank you, Miss Patterer," said the host, heralding my awkward, hasty bow. No applause, not even the scattered politeness I'd hoped for. When I walked off, my boot heels thudded so hard on the step it bounced the violin case in my hand. My parents were in the third row, easy to spot because my mother had worn her bright patchwork coat, all sewn from thrifted scraps. I caught her expression for one split second, eyes flicking up at me, lips pressed so tightly her chin dimpled. My father, older now, white at the temples, leaned forward as if a little embarrassed for me. When the lights dimmed for the next pitch, a biotech VR simulator, I ducked out into the cool corridor, my instrument wedged under my arm, and I kept walking as I heard a few scattered snickers. That night I found myself in the spare room of my apartment, surrounded by shavings and silence. Rain battered the window with the insistence of someone denied entrance. I'd set the violin down on the tawny felt mat, half-mindedly running my thumb over the scroll's delicate spiral. Once, carving that shape had been pure calm and rage and hope all tangled. An escape from the slow suffocation of routine and judgment. Now it felt like proof I'd misjudged everything. The world wasn't built for someone like me, a luthier without a legacy shop, a woman with no trust fund or music degree, someone who came up smelling of cedar and old glue, skimming audiophile boards and borrowing practice spaces from seminary basements. I lay in bed, phone face down, my email pinged with courtesy rejections from all three of the judges even before midnight. No one believed in what I was building. It hadn't always been this way. Growing up in East Van in the two-bedroom off-Commercial Drive, I'd been the crafty one, making clothes for toys and painting signs for garage sales. My older brother Nick and younger sister Talia followed the safe paths, Nick into law, Talia rocketing off to Alberta for some petroleum gig. I'd fix my neighbor Mr. Dezuik's guitars after school, scraping bar chords and sanding stubborn ridges. He'd pay me with string sets, stories about Italian makers I'd never meet. When I told my parents at 17 that I wanted to become a luthier, a real one, apprenticeships and all, they'd gone silent for 2 minutes. You could hear the dust in the corners. "That's," my father started, then stopped. "A hobby, not a career," my mother finished, gentle but firm. No one in my family played music, at least not seriously. No one believed you could make any kind of living handcrafting things anymore. My aunts and uncles weighed in at every reunion or phone call, sometimes with concern, more often with a sort of mean humor, the way blue-collar families laughed off dreams they couldn't afford. "Maybe she'll open a ukulele booth at Capilano Mal's. Wait till she needs to pay her own rent." At first I doubled down, working part-time gigs to buy tools, spending every extra hour at the community workshop, copying plans, pestering the old German master who rented a bench beside mine. My hands bled from chiseling maple, my wrist buzzed with tendon ache. No one cheered my progress except Mr. Dezuik, who died 2 months after my first guitar came out of the varnish booth. Even my friends drifted away, busy with grown-up lives or too embarrassed to explain what I was doing to their own parents. It was after that expo flop that I hit my lowest point. Orders were drying up, boutique players now buying from mass-market shops or Instagram-famous Europeans. My best prospect, a cellist from Burnaby, had just cancelled, citing budget cuts and something more modern. I stared at the grain of a half-finished backplate, wishing it would split and give me an excuse to quit. Then one night the phone buzzed again, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Hi, is this Chloe Patterer?" The voice was British-tinged, older, gruff but careful. "Yes, this is she," I said, wary. "My name's Lionel March. I'm passing through Vancouver next weekend. Saw your profile in the Crafts Quarterly, was wondering if you ever take visitors. I have an item that needs repair, very old, very dear to me." A tingle, a mixture of suspicion and wild, forbidden hope, ran up my spine. The magazine had run a feature the month before, sandwiched between articles on elaborate soaps and woven baskets. I'd nearly talked myself out of agreeing when I recalled having nothing left to lose. Lionel showed up in the morning, umbrella askew, slicker still dripping Pacific drizzle. He looked late 50s, built like an athlete gone to seed, with silver curling from his collars. In his arms, a battered violin case, edges worn soft with decades of touch. Up close the violin was magic, splits radiating from an ancient bridge, varnish flaked in russet patterns. The inside label was hand-inked Italian. I traced the arching gently as if reading Braille. "My grandfather's," Lionel explained, voice thickening, "came up with him from Krakow in the 40s. Every luthier I've met said it couldn't be restored, not properly." I felt a strange sort of courage flicker inside me, the feeling that everyone else had dismissed a thing, but that didn't mean the story was finished. "I think I can bring it most of the way back," I said, "but the work will take time." Lionel watched me, measuring, and slowly nodded. "Do what you must, play it for me when it's done." We struck a bargain. Over the next 3 months, while the city dipped into early spring and then stuttered into summer, I worked on his instrument. I sanded splits, carved a new soundpost, matched centuries-old wood with what I could source from a retired copyist in Victoria. Every step felt like mending not just the violin but something in myself, the faith I'd lost in the hollow judge's room, in the skeptical faces of my old neighbors. At last, one late June evening, I rosined a bow and coaxed the first clean G from the rebuilt strings. Pure, sonorous, unmistakably whole, I wept, unashamed. When Lionel returned, he stood silent as I played the opening bars of a waltz before handing him the bow. "Not bad," his hands trembled. "Not bad at all, Miss Patterer." He paid me triple and wrote a note that later led to my first commission, a cello restoration for a rising prodigy playing with the VSO. From there, word spread. Musicians from across the city, then Spokane and Seattle, sought me out for honest repairs, bespoke instruments, and the sort of tonal finesse none of the chain shops could offer. I hired a single apprentice then too. Set up a workshop in an empty storefront, with long windows where passers-by could see light glinting off maple shavings, the smooth tension of bending wood over iron forms. At first I avoided home, my parents, their stubborn pride and silent doubts. My brother never called, my sister sent emoji-laden texts but never visited. A reporter from the CBC came by one day, voice recorder in hand, asking questions with that gentle condescension people reserve for odd jobs they secretly envy. "How does it feel making something this old-fashioned here in Vancouver?" "I never thought it was old-fashioned," I answered. "It's just slow, slower than people like sometimes." But music, real music, waits for no one. The piece ran on radio and online, and for the first time my parents heard my name spoken as something other than a punchline. My mother called, voice choked with pride and confusion. My father didn't say much except, "Maybe we should come see your place, bring Uncle Marco too." The thought made me both anxious and absurdly hopeful. 3 years to the day after my humiliating pitch, the city held its Spring Arts Festival, a gathering for makers, musicians, and collectors. The expo center, same hall, new banners, buzzed with color and laughter. I was invited not as a hopeful but as a featured exhibitor. My booth, wood-scented and bright with polished violins and guitars, stood beside younger artisans' work, expanses of glass, clay, metal, and sound. My parents came early with Uncle Marco and a couple of cousins in tow. My mother wore her old patchwork coat, faded at the seams but proud as a banner. "So, this is it," Marco surveyed the shop corner, the steady trickle of traffic pausing to examine the curves of my newest double bass. "This is it," I smiled, holding back tears. I worried they'd feel out of place among the well-heeled patrons and espresso-toting folk musicians. By afternoon, the crowd thickened. Midway through the day, a line formed, young students and grey-haired players seeking advice and repairs. One petite girl brought her battered violin. "Think you could fix the seam?" she asked, expectant. "We can do better than that," I answered, showing her the bench, the tools, the wall of honours my staff had half-mockingly built, press clippings, festival awards, a letter from the VSO's concertmaster. That's when I heard the voice that stopped the whole room. "Well, if it isn't little Chloe, our own Stradivarius, I told your mom you'd be building coffee tables by now." It was Aunt Val, grinning from behind her sunglasses, voice pitched high for maximum audibility. She looked around for approval, waiting to be joined in the old family joke. A little cluster of relatives, distant, gossipy ones, sniggered on cue. I didn't flinch. Instead, I gestured to the end of the booth where my latest commission, the one for the city's newest chamber orchestra, sat inside a glass case under pale blue lighting. Its varnish glowed with a lustre years in the making. The scroll was inlaid with a flourish bespoke to the ensemble, a gift from one struggling craftsperson to another. Just as I was about to speak, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a long black coat approached, a figure I knew from music magazines and YouTube. The concertmaster himself, Eric Milos, born in Poland, now leading half the city's major performances. He stopped at the booth, eyes on the cello, then smiled at me. "You must be Chloe. Yehudi told me you could save an instrument's soul." His voice cut through the hubbub, gentle but unwavering. Old aunties and cousins craned to hear. "Would you like to try it?" I managed, pulse thudding in my neck. "With pleasure," he said. I opened the case, cradling the cello and bow, guiding his hands. Eric took the chair provided, settled the cello between his knees and drew the bow slowly across the strings. The first note rose, rich, alive, haunting. The nearby booths fell silent. He launched into Bach's Prelude in G, fingers nimble on the fingerboard, coaxing out every warmth and sorrow the wood had learned in its short, painstaking life. At the close of the piece, people applauded, real, awed clapping. Some were recording on their phones, others just closed their eyes and nodded, lost in joy. Eric stood, bowing slightly to the audience, then to me. "Whoever made this understands both grief and hope." I swallowed hard, feeling the old pain and pride well up together. A reporter caught the moment, cameras flashed. My parents reached for my hands, pride and apology flickering in their faces. Aunt Val's mouth hung open mid-joke. The same skeptical relatives who had once jeered now pressed close with careful questions. "How long does it take to make one cello?" Uncle Marco asked, or temping skepticism. "Depends on the story you want it to tell," I replied, calm now. My mother squeezed my arm. "We're proud, even if it took us too long to say it." That evening, I walked across the Cambie Bridge, the festival's music lingering on the wind. The city shimmered against low clouds, neon and street lamps fluttering in puddles. My hands still smelled of wood, glue, and resin. I had wanted a moment of triumph that settled old scores, one that forced every doubter to kneel before proof. But as the night grew cold and quiet, I realized that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the work, the piece that arose with the tap of mallet on chisel, the music living on in fingers stronger and more loving than before. I had dreamed the ridiculous, endured laughter until it hardened into resolve. Now that dream had found a place not just in me but in the living air of my city, and at last I had come home.